Welcome, everybody, to the Sunday School Dropouts podcast holiday version. It is the most wonderful time of the year. And so we are doing some special episodes this month, holiday Q&A. We've been asking for the last several weeks for people to submit questions about the holidays because, sometimes when Jesus used to be the reason for the season, but isn't anymore, it can feel really overwhelming and triggering to know how to celebrate the holidays. So we put a call out there for the last few weeks on our social media platforms to submit your questions, and y'all came through. It's awesome. So we actually have 2 episodes that we're going to be doing. I'll tell you about them in just a moment. But I'm excited today to be able to welcome a guest co-host, which is my friend and colleague, Matthias Roberts. I'll talk about him a little bit more in a moment. Andrew is still sending us his thoughts and prayers, just taking a little bit of a break because he's had a lot of things going on in his life as of late and has needed to just put a pause on certain aspects, but he will be back. I'm not exactly sure when, but he will be back. We're on great terms. He's alive and kicking. You're probably following him on Instagram and you can see everything that he's doing there. But if you're wondering why he's kind of been in and out over the last few episodes, he's just dealing with life because that's what we do and taking care of himself, which I'm so glad of. So I'm going to get into the description of the podcast in just a moment. But of course, like we do with every single podcast, we just want to recognize that some of the topics we discuss in the episodes can always, bring up various feelings, emotions, triggers, and some of them that might require a bit of processing for you. And maybe that's too much to handle at this point right now. So like always, please always feel free to skip any episode or parts of episodes and come back if and when you're ready. Our goal, of course, is always to help you trust your own body, your own lived experience. And so that means you can take what you leave or take what you need and leave what you don't. So because we have so many excellent questions, we're going to skip some of the other segments that we normally do. And I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit about the most wonderful time of the year, right? As a kid, I loved Christmas. Moreover, I loved Christmas music. If I would have had it my way, I would have listened to Christmas music year round, but my mom made me wait until about mid-November until I could play it on my boombox. And then she waited until after Thanksgiving to play it on the family stereo. Now, as an adult, I'm actually glad that she made me wait to listen to it because it meant that the music was special. Not listening to it year round made me really appreciate it during the weeks that it was quote unquote appropriate. Of course, having grown up in a fundamentalist Christian home and church, Christmas was always a big deal. Celebrating the birth of our Savior, the one who came to save us from ourselves, was no small matter. We went to a large church, and since my siblings and I were quite gifted musically, we were always asked to be a part of the Christmas Eve services. Yes, services, usually 4 or 5 of them, depending on the year. And there was this one special song by Darlene Check of Hillsong called Joy to the World, He is Here. Joy to the world. I won't sing it any more than that because that could be a trigger. Anyways, it was considered my song, Laura's song. It was a song that I sang year after year. And even after moving to Nashville, people would email me about it because whoever was singing it the next year or the years that I wasn't there had attempted to sing it, but they weren't me. So that's what I'm still kind of known as, the person who sings that song. But it is a good song to belt, and I love it. I remember one year my brother telling me just belt it like Christina Aguilera, and she was my inspiration. And that is, of course, what I did. Anyways, I had a complicated relationship with Christmas music and the holiday season in general as I began actively deconstructing my faith. It became difficult to know why I was celebrating when I didn't believe the reason for the season as I had when I was growing up. I didn't really feel joyous or merry. In fact, I started to dread it at times. I didn't know how to tell my family that I didn't want to go to Christmas Eve services or that the Christmas story didn't really have the same meaning anymore. And on top of that, I was single, which meant that there was this certain expectation that because I didn't have a spouse or children of my own, I needed to be quote unquote home for the holidays. And that was really difficult. Being home around this time of year was painful because the emphasis was on the Christmas story and going to a church so much. I was constantly having to choose between myself and my family. Did I appease my family by going to church, or did I disappoint them but keep myself safe because church felt so scary? And it's worth noting that the church that they went to for many, many years after I moved to the South was the same church that I experienced significant spiritual abuse in. Slowly, though, as I began to heal, I noticed that my relationship to the holidays changed too. Certain things started to not be so scary, and I was able to begin considering how I would want to celebrate the holidays. Did you catch that? How I wanted to celebrate the holidays. This was a new concept for me, and yet it was what helped me feel this sense of freedom and even joy. I got to be the one to decide how I wanted to celebrate the holidays and even if I wanted to celebrate them in the first place. And, there were some years where I didn't feel so merry, and so I didn't decorate or I didn't set up a tree. And other years, I went all out. This year is one of them. But for me, nowadays, I generally like to celebrate Christmas, but like Taylor Swift, I have my own version of doing it. To me, it's about celebrating a sense of togetherness and relationship. It's about warmth and connection. It's enjoyment and an invitation to be present. I don't go to church services, and my family knows that even if I do choose to spend the holiday with them, I won't be participating in that piece of it. I do get gifts for my nieces and nephews. And when I've had a partner in the past, we've done the silly matching pajamas for Christmas morning. I've really made it what I want it to be. And, I've kept a couple things too from my growing up years. I'm still that excited kid who loves listening to Christmas music. But for me, I do it as soon as November hits. I bump it up a few weeks. And you know what? My favorite thing to do every night after I decorate for Christmas is to turn off all the lights in my entire house, except for the Christmas tree. And I just let myself be present in the life that I have created. It's my favorite. I know that not everyone thinks about the holidays the way that I do. And, truthfully, the goal of deconstructing your faith or healing from religious trauma is not to get to the same place that I do. It's just to create what's important for you. So for some of you, it might include a repaired relationship with your family. And for others, it might mean that every year you find a new beach to go to and take a vacation. There's many different ways that this season can be celebrated, and there is full permission to not celebrate it either. But because this season is often central to so many religions, we wanted to take a couple episodes of answering your questions about the holiday season. So this week, I'm going to be joined by Matthias Roberts, who is a friend and a colleague. More about him in a moment. And then the next episode of Answering Questions, I'm going to be joined by my friend Cindy Wong Brandt, who is the creator of Parenting Forward, which is a group of people who are learning how to parent after religious trauma. And so on that episode, we'll be tackling some of the questions that you all have been asking specifically around dealing with families, being a parent, and how to navigate this time with children, building new traditions, and more. So with that, I would love to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Matthias Roberts. Matthias is a psychotherapist specializing in religious and spiritual trauma, and he is the author of Holy Runaways, Rediscovering Faith After Being Burned by Religion, and Beyond Shame, Creating a Healthy Sex Life on Your Own Terms. He hosts Queerology, a podcast on belief and being, and holds 2 master's degrees from the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, one in theology and culture and another one in counseling psychology. Matthias, too, is a survivor of high control religion, and his personal story has inspired his professional work. His underlying motivation for working with clients is that he knows and wants his clients to know that healing from religious trauma is possible. His work has been featured by the Oprah magazine, Pretty awesome. Bustle, Women's Day, Sojourners, the Seattle Times, and many others. He is coming to us today from Seattle, Washington. And personally, Matthias is an amazing friend to me. And a little secret about us is that we are bachelor buddies. Meaning that we both watch shows like The Bachelor and Bachelorette and regularly text about it. And little side note that most people don't know is that we are even a part of a Bachelor Fantasy League where you can earn points and prizes. Yeah, we are really just that cool. But don't worry, we're not talking about that today. Instead, we'll be answering some of the questions that you submitted about religious trauma and the holidays. Welcome to the Sunday School Dropouts, Matthias. It is so wonderful to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to talk about the reason for this season.
Me too.
Yes. Well, before we do that, do you want to just maybe introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, where you're located, and maybe a little bit about your profession and the clients you see.
Sure. Yeah. As you said, my name is Matthias Roberts. I am a psychotherapist based in Seattle, Washington, and I primarily work with queer folks who are coming from religious backgrounds. So I have some folks who are trying to integrate religion. I have other folks who are trying to recover from religion. I have other folks who are trying to just move the fuck on. And that's kind of a lot of the work that I do. But I also have a lot of specialized training in trauma recovery, both working with folks who have been victims of sexual harm, but also religious harm. And so do a lot of that work as well.
Yeah. I love it. I love your work. I found you online, a couple years ago or something. And I know I put it in the show notes, but your book, Beyond Shame, was like one of the first kind of therapeutic books on sex and shame and just kind of like putting together the weird purity culture messaging and how it impacts us. So I've loved your work since you came on my radar back then. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, that feeling is mutual. So.
Oh, thanks. So I'm excited for today because we are going to do this holiday Q&A. This is the first part of 2 episodes. We have Cindy Wong Brandt coming on in a couple of weeks, who's going to also be answering some questions. But I think we should just dive right in, if that feels okay to you. And we'll kind of, if we go off on tangents or whatnot, I know Matthias and I both work with people coming out of religious trauma. So there might be questions that pop up that we get from our clients as we're going along here, but we will just kind of jump in. And this is one of my favorite questions because I get it a lot. So there's actually a few questions that came in about this, but I'm going to kind of consolidate. Somebody said, help me find music. I miss it so much, but it physically hurts to listen to the music. Somebody else said, how do I find holiday music that doesn't feel painful? I miss it so much. And I resonate with that because I actually love Christmas music. But I'll put you on the spot first. And Matthias, if you want to jump in here.
Yeah. This one is so tricky because I love music too. Like I constantly have music on, and especially around the holidays, like love Christmas music. But it gets so tricky when that Christmas music, like, starts to bring back pain, bring up pain. And so 2 things kind of come to mind to me here, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this too. The first one, I feel like there's maybe 2 different approaches. One is to try to find music that is similar enough that still evokes the holiday-y feelings without triggering the responses. So what has worked for me at times has been like jazz music. I feel like there's a lot of jazz that kind of has Christmassy feelings without being explicit Christmas music. But I think there are other genres out there. So I think that's one approach. But I think the other approach is to, how do we actually start to listen to the pain that comes up when this music is on? Because I think it's not the music, although it can be. But it's more like, what are the stories? What is the particularity of the pain? And if we can start to work with that, we may, I'm not going to guarantee it, but we may be able to find that we have more ability to listen to this music without it bringing up the difficult and painful memories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agree with that because I know that there was a point too for myself personally where I really did have to put a big pause on it. It just brought back too much. There was too many triggers. And so to your point there, I think working through the pain piece, what that's bringing up, which is oftentimes a lot of triggers, memories from the past, what that music means or has meant, working through that oftentimes it doesn't always mean that we can then listen to music or to Christmas music in particular without any triggers or any sort of activation, but sometimes it can. Mm-hmm. I know for me, like starting to uncouple the like the Christmas music from the Christian tradition was also really important. So looking at kind of like looking at the Christmas story of Jesus or what is it called? Nativity story, almost as like, clearly we know where I'm at now, but kind of like as a bit of like a myth and not in like in terms of like, we hear different stories from different traditions and we don't necessarily have to take them all on or believe them or things like that. And for me, I started putting that into that category to kind of decrease some of the charge over it. So, like, here's what the Christian religion calls a Christmas story. Here is what this tradition or this religion calls a Christmas story. So being able to kind of start to uncouple like Christmas music equals this specific story was really helpful, as well as I did a deep dive on a lot of Christmas carols and going like, why were they actually written? My mind is drawing a blank, but like there's a particular Christmas song that a lot of people sing that it's like really not even about like the nativity piece, but we attribute it to that. But it was like about finding peace after war. Or you think about songs like Silent Night that were written as just kind of this like hopefulness after this time. I think it's the Napoleon War, the Napoleonic times is what they call it, And so for me, like starting to understand, like these were written for a variety of reasons that may not be like worship music essentially was actually helpful to go like, oh, I'm kind of singing these songs almost as like a soundtrack to the Broadway play of the Nativity, like that sort of thing. So sometimes that reframing was really helpful for me. I know I've worked with a lot of clients where they felt similar, where they've been able to kind of tease apart those things. But yeah, that's kind of where I land on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I've also found, and I imagine, like I'm seeing stuff people may already have tried at this point, but I have found, like, I was only allowed to listen to, like, Christian music growing up. And so all of the Christmas music that I had is, like, Point of Grace and Natalie Grant and, like, all of that.
Okay, but side note, really quick, I did just download the Avalon Christmas album because it is so good.
I think one of the Point of Grace albums, I put it on all the time. I like, this is Christmas, but that's just as nostalgic in some ways. Like, but to go and listen to some of like not all of those folks, but like especially Natalie Grant is covering, like she's singing covers of like Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston, and like to go and actually listen to the originals has been like, is different enough. It evokes the feelings, but it's different enough that I'm like, oh, I get to create new memories with this. Like it gets to be different. And again, it depends on your triggers as to whether that actually will work or not, but finding those different versions has been really helpful for me.
Yeah. And I think, the last thing I would add to that is, we have the beauty of playlists nowadays. And so make playlists of songs that work for you. Like there are still a couple songs that I can't listen to because there are some very specific memories. But I have this huge like holiday playlist of like 14, 15 hours worth of music. And I just took those ones off. And so, yeah, to your point that it's like put all the versions of, whatever song and put all the Jackson 5, I saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus and then all of the, like, it's just, it's fun. You can play around with it a little bit, but also then don't beat yourself up if you need to just take a break for a while. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself time for the healing the pain, feeling the pain, understanding what that is. And then it's always there. It's always going to be here. You can come back to it next year or 5 years down the road. So yeah, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This next one it's a good one. I get this very much. How do I deal with the anger that I have towards my parents for their role in forcing religion on me? I'm going to have to spend a lot of time with them over the holidays, and I'm just so angry with them. Whew, I feel that.
Yeah. I guess my first question is, what feels scary about your anger? Like, is it possible for you to be able to go home and express some of that anger? And it may not be. Like, I understand, like, oftentimes I think, especially within these contexts, like, anger can't be received by our parents. And so it can feel impossible to then show that. But can you be angry? Can you give yourself permission to be angry and let that then inform you? And if we take it seriously, it might bring up some questions of how you spend your holidays. Maybe this is a year where you don't go home. Maybe this is a year where you decide to take some time off and start to develop different or new holiday traditions. Like, I realize there's so much complexity here that may not be possible. But like, I always treat anger as it is telling us something for a reason. And there's something deeply good about our anger because it's showing us something is wrong here. And so many of us have been taught to just push that down, push it aside, don't express it because it's not polite. And I always say, like, no, like, let's listen to it. We need to do something with it. We need to be able to get it to someone. And so how do we take it seriously is my big question there.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of anger. I love it. I wish we could all be more familiar with it because I think there's so much power and passion in it. And kind of building off of what you just said, Matthias, like the idea of boundaries also sticks out in this, just in the sense of when you go, I have to spend a lot of time with these people, whether it's parents, other family members, whomever. And I'm just really angry with them, and it can be really difficult and scary to go into a situation like that and to be like, I'm going to have to talk about these things or do these things. And so I would also be curious to know, like, could we set up some boundaries, which are, what do I need in order to help myself feel safe? So that might be deciding ahead of time, what are some topics that I feel perfectly fine talking about? Or what are some topics that I don't feel okay talking about? And how might I kind of get out of those conversations in a way that is maybe a bit more graceful than, rageful or whatnot? Maybe it's coming up with some, I call them broken record statements. So I know this is really important to you. I don't feel comfortable engaging with that. And if somebody's like, well, why don't you, this, we always talk about this. We always do this. I know this feels important to you, but I don't feel comfortable engaging in it. And so it's a way of validating what they're saying or doing, as well as validating your own experience, and then being able to give yourself an out, or even deciding ahead of time, like if I'm going to, they always ask me to do the Christmas prayer or to go to a Christmas Eve service or something like that. How would I want to respond? And maybe that is communicating it to them ahead of time. Emotions are always high around the holidays. And so even though they might know you haven't gone to church in years, they'll still expect you to go. And so to address some of those things ahead of time, I do that with my family, where I'll just say, hey, I just want to remind you, I'm not going to be going to the Christmas service this year. And so that when it comes up, They are already know that. So being proactive as well as recognizing like, where are my own limits? And then on the other side of that, what do I need to take care of myself? Because if I'm going to go in and spend a lot of time with people that I am really struggling with, then I need to build in some ways that I can escape or decompress or have some connection outside of that feels life-giving or that I can just vent to. And so identifying like what might that look like or what can I put into place that would help with that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I feel like the two of those things that you mentioned are well, everything you mentioned is key, but two of them are sticking out to me. that setting something up beforehand, that like maybe you want to express that anger, like maybe it needs to be expressed, but maybe the time is to do it before you're at Christmas dinner with everyone in the family, like
Right.
having a phone call with your parents or whomever to say like, yeah, I'm still coming, but we need to talk about some of these things, like let's do that now. Or if you're in a place where you can't have those conversations, where it's not possible, that having that support system. I know whenever I go home for the holidays, I have a couple people that I tell, like, I'm going to need to be texting you constantly. Like, and like, is that okay? Can you show up for me in that way? And I have some friends who just like get it and who I can, run to the bathroom and just send a text like, you won't believe what my mom just said. Like, and I can't have that conversation with my mom, but I can have it with a friend. And it helps, blow off some of that steam to have other people who are like, what the fuck? Like, and be in that with me. And that is really helpful for managing some of that anger and frustration.
Yeah. And you know what? If you have nobody to text yourself.
Yes.
Like sometimes just
letters.
like the getting it out. Yeah. Like on your notes app or texting yourself or a journal, having a way to like get it out is so important, especially when we're talking about anger. Because it is such an active emotion. It needs like a place to be expressed. And so, I very much agree with that. Yeah, that's a great question.
I have on my notes app, I call it like my 5-year-old notes. I stole this idea from someone else, but they're like, it's like my note where I get to show up as like the grumpy, stomping around the house like 5-year-old that feels like is inside of me sometimes, and I just get to type out everything I want to say and like completely unfiltered, and it's so helpful.
This is why we're friends. I also have that folder on my phone. It is called Venting Letters. And I have a good friend of mine who knows this and knows my passcode to my phone, so that in the off chance that I die unexpectedly, they can go and erase that immediately so that no one else finds it. But it is so nice. It's so wonderful because, I think with anger, people are like, oh, well, if I express it, then it's more likely that I'm going to say it to them or whatever. And it's like, no, when you allow yourself to say it, it's out. Like it's out of your system. It's not still living and active. And so then actually the likelihood that you would say it or act on that to that intensity actually decreases.
Yes.
So it's counterintuitive, but it's really helpful. So having the 5-year-old letters or the venting letters or whatever is extremely helpful. Because you can just say whatever you want and nobody's going to get hurt. Yeah. It's going to be fine.
Yes.
I love it. Well, sticking then on the theme of parents, this was another really, really good question. I find that when it comes to talking with and being with my parents, I am prone toward the fawn response. How do I let them know that I am not interested in celebrating the holidays like I used to, because I don't believe like I used to, without going into the fawn response, especially when they are disappointed, which is almost worse than the anger thing. Right? Like, I'm not mad at you. I'm disappointed. I very much understand this. I'm going to echo a little bit what I said in the previous question, in the sense of what are the conversations and things that can be decided ahead of time, especially when we're talking about the fawn response, where those in-person kind of in the moment situations can often feel additionally activating. So if somebody's standing right in front of you demanding an answer or wanting to know, why aren't you going to do this thing, that can really trigger the fawn response. So if there is space to be able to have the beforehand conversations and whatnot, I would really encourage that. And the other piece to that I'll say is don't be afraid to use text messaging or email or even writing something out and reading it. Sometimes it can feel really difficult if you feel like you're on the spot or that you have to give an answer right away. And so that might be easier. And the other piece that goes along with this, and maybe this is more conversation related, but I know that I can be very prone to a fawn response personally. And I can feel it. I'm very aware when it's happening now in my body. And I also, though, realize that, I have a lot of family members that are trying. They're trying to understand this different person that I am, and they don't get it because they haven't changed. And that's not always great, but I want to be able to respect the fact that they have their way of doing things. So I know for me, especially with the fawn response, I always like to identify like, what are the things I can say yes to? So for instance, I've never been asked this, but I know a client of mine has been asked this, like, I've always been the one to say the prayer before the family Christmas dinner. I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I could read this poem that I found, and this is really meaningful to me. So it's saying I can't do this thing, but here's what I can do, and that's been really helpful. I know for me, for my clients. So yeah, I think that's kind of my initial thought is what can we do beforehand to identify what I do feel okay with, what I don't feel okay with? How can I communicate them? Yeah. What do you think, Matthias?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's difficult when we're talking about these responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, because they're primarily involuntary responses. Like, I mean, certainly there are ways that we can set ourselves up to recognize when we're in the moment, to be able to step away. But they're primarily, we don't have a lot of control over them. And so that, I mean, that's what makes it so difficult. We can be aware that it's happening in the moment and feel paralyzed as we're doing something where we can have a conversation inside of, I don't want to be doing this, and still be doing it in the same moment. And so I really think about, like, how do we start to bring some compassion to ourselves in this reality of we are in situations where our nervous systems are on high alert, where we maybe historically and maybe even actively have not been safe, and trusting and knowing, like, this is my body's response trying to make me be safe in this moment. And I may be doing things that I don't want, that I don't agree with. I may be saying things that I don't agree with, but I am creating a form of safety. It may not be the safety I want. It's a form of safety. And so bringing some compassion of, like, yes, where are the small victories? Where are the places where I have maybe said something that no one else even noticed, but is a big deal for me? I showed up in a different way. But also, where are the places where I did have a fawn response? And that is okay. It is part of healing. And we can continue to learn how to soothe our nervous systems to progressively, slowly start to show up differently in these spaces.
Yeah, I think that is so important because I think about like where I'm at today as opposed to 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And of course, there's so many things that are different. But I did not just wake up and all of a sudden one day I'm like, oh, I don't fawn in front of my, family anymore. Right. It's like, okay, not only do I still do that, but it was those like little tiny moments in trauma therapy. We call that titration, where we add just a little tiny bit that feels maybe a bit uncomfortable, but not intolerable. And so we say, hey, for this year, you know what? The most I can do is that when we're singing Christmas carols, I am mouthing along instead of noise coming out of me.
Yeah.
And we go, that's it then do that. If that feels maybe uncomfortable, like, oh, I don't know, this is different, but it doesn't feel intolerable where it's going to push me into this space of maybe collapse or feeling like I've got to run away, then go with it. And then we just build on it, little tiny increments to make sure that we are still being able to feel safe.
Mhm.
So I love that because it does then give us permission to like really celebrate all the tiny wins that we can then, do more after that. The other thing that comes to mind as, like marriage and family therapist, I don't see marriages or families, but it's really a way of looking at at relationships, at systems, right? And so, one of the things that we look at within a system is that we all kind of take on different roles within the systems, different jobs that makes everything what we would call status quo or status, right? And so when one person kind of steps outside and says, that's not really what I want to do, then the entire system is in flux and the entire system tries to get you to go back into what they've prescribed for you because it makes them feel okay as well. And that's where we do start to see fawning can really show up because you're going, I do want to do this different thing, but everybody else is really kind of up in arms maybe because I'm trying to do this different thing. So it is easier for me to just kind of lean back in to that role. And probably until the day we die, it's going to be the hardest in the family system to step into different roles and different behaviors. Like this is the hardest place to do it.
Yes.
Because it's like, gosh, I mean, I can still go back to certain places and I can be aware, like, all right, be an adult. And I feel like I'm 12. I walk in and I am not 40. I am 10,
Yes.
And it's just the familiarity of our body. So knowing that, and then what you said with compassion, I think is so key to go like, yeah, this is just going to be a harder situation. Just is. And what can I do to be kind to myself? To know that, to be patient, to be kind is so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Right. And that it's not, I want to like emphasize this, like in some ways it's not our fault that we're going into those responses. Like it's the wiring of our brains. It's the wiring of our nervous systems. Like those neuronal pathways are formed. The brain uses pathways that are formed. It's much easier to use an already formed pathway than to try to build a new pathway. And so we're doing, I mean, so much work, even showing up in slightly different ways is building those new pathways that over time will become more developed, will become more automatic. But it is slow work.
Yeah. So the next question, I feel like it's kind of all going together and building on each other. And this person says, you know what? The entire season feels triggering. How do I handle it? Which I just have so much empathy for because, one of the hardest parts, a lot of my clients talk about this is like, okay, I leave religion, but then I go out into this culture that's like very pro religion and it's pro Christian religion. It's like, why? This is why we have Sundays off. This is why we have, national holidays, and certain time off and things like that. And so it's like, you can't really escape it. And the entire quote unquote Christmas season is built around capitalistic baby Jesus birth, like that just, it is. And so you can walk into shopping malls. I don't even know if those are a thing anymore, but like you can walk into stores, you can turn on the radio and there's Christmas songs that were sung in church. And there's, different, not game shows, like reality shows and all these things around the holidays. So I'm just saying that because I think part of it is like living in the world, especially in the United States or the Western world, where there's just a lot of there's going to be a lot of triggers. There are. It's very, very difficult to escape. And that doesn't mean just, deal with it or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But I think recognizing that this is just naturally going to be a triggering time for you goes back to that compassion piece of going, okay, so I might need to be really sensitive to that and put some things in place for several weeks just to be able to navigate this time of year. So I'll think of a couple of those, but I'm gonna turn it over to you. What comes up for you as you read this question, Matthias?
Yeah, I think we're on a similar wavelength. Is how do we then start to build in practices of care, and also begin to ask these questions of how much do you have to participate. I think some of us we have to. And like you're saying, it is unavoidable, like it truly is, but like we do have choice and agency sometimes to be able to either opt in or opt out of some of these things, and sometimes we let our senses of obligation get in the way of expressing our agency. and so are there places where you can say, I'm not going to do that this year. I'm actually going to have Christmas alone and stay in your pajamas and watch movies all day. Like I think there are things that we can do sometimes, depending on our context and circumstances. But in those places where it is unavoidable, or we do have family obligations that we can't get out of, or it doesn't feel comfortable to get out of them, it does bring me back to like spaces of care. How do we move slowly, carefully, tenderly, knowing like this is really difficult? I can't avoid these things. So how am I going to start to get more of what I need? Care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From friends, from other communities. How do we build those into our lives?
And it sounds weird, but maybe one of the things that we can kind of lean into is that around this time of year, there's so much that is the same as last year and the year before and the year before. Like we know there's going to be the work holiday party, and we know that our parents are going to want to celebrate this way. And we know that there's going to be these things on TV or whatnot. And how can we use that to our benefit, like in a planning way, to say like, hey, I'm not there this year. This is not going to be cool. So it's like, you know what, when the email goes out for work that says, hey, company Christmas party is on such and such day, I've already got my email ready to send for a, half day PTO, or I already have something else going on, going back to even a couple questions ago of like, are there things where it's like, I know my parents are going to be asking for this, or I know my family's going to be expecting this, and I can come up with some responses beforehand or decide beforehand what does feel okay with me. And then on the flip side of that, of course, is going back to the care thing. What do I need that will help me feel grounded, feel stable? I think back to like the beginning of the pandemic when everything was really topsy-turvy because we had no answers. We had no idea what was going on. Everything was a big question mark. And one of the things I would work through with my clients who were feeling triggered a lot was like, what are the things we know we can count on every single day? What are the things I can do for myself to provide a sense of stability? And so it might be that every morning I get up and I have a smoothie and my cup of coffee and I listen to this podcast. Great. Can we continue doing that to give ourselves, in the midst of chaos, a sense of groundedness? What do I need to find just a little bit of stability, throughout the day, even though there's these things that are going on that feel outside of my control, that throw me off whack? The idea is, when you look at those tall skyscraper buildings, there's a way that they build them into the ground that allows them to sway but not topple over. And that's kind of what we're looking like. We can kind of sway and move with it, but feel really, really grounded.
Mm.
And so that sometimes comes from like, what can we provide for ourselves, knowing that this could be a really chaotic time. So yes, the practical things like boundaries that we've talked about throughout this, but also like, what are my go-tos to create a sense of stability, and then really holding on to those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that skyscraper thing, because I think a really helpful word, so many of those skyscrapers have counterbalances built in, counterweights. And I think like that word counterbalance or counterweight, like what is an equal but opposite force that can help us counterbalance what is knocking us off, and in the form of care. What's a caring counterbalance?
Yes, I love that. And of course, that is going to play right into our next question of the pressure to go to Christmas services. How do you handle this? Oh, I get it.
I think some of it comes down to the question of how well are we able to tolerate conflict. I think that's ultimately what this question is. And some of us, we don't have the ability to handle conflict. And so then the question is what we were just talking about. Like, how do we counterbalance? Maybe we still go, but we don't sing or like whatever. But for others of us who are maybe trying to work on tolerating conflict more, or who don't have as much of a issue with it, the other question is, can we set boundaries? Can we say, yeah, I'm not going to go to the Christmas service with you this year, but I'll do desserts afterwards, or like whatever that looks like. Ultimately, though, it is like, can we tolerate the conflict?
Yeah, because there will be like,
Yeah.
I think, like, I know it sounds like maybe broken record a little bit, but even if you set the boundary, like, hey, this has happened to me before where I'm like, I'm not going to the Christmas service. And here's a little funny story. So I remember this one year, I said, I am not going to this specific Christmas service, which was the church that I had grown up in, worked it, was very abusive.
Mm.
And so somebody in my family said, well, you said that specific church, so how about we go to this one? And I was like, oh, great. This is the game we're playing, right? So for that year, I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to go with it. They respected my boundary that said, I'm not going to this specific church. I will go with them. And then the next year I knew better, where I said, I'm not going to go. And I knew that it ultimately would be respected, but I knew that it would be pushed back on. And so I went into that situation knowing that an hour or so before the Christmas service, I was going to be asked several more times, are you going to come to this? Now, for me, I knew that it wasn't coming from a place of malice. It was coming from a place of, I want my family together on Christmas. And I can appreciate that, but that's where I was at that time. I think there would have been other times in my life where I would have seen that as extremely disrespectful, because I would have seen that as maybe an act of coercion, or trying to manipulate me into going. And so I do want to leave space that sometimes as we grow and change, how we interpret situations also changes. And so there is space for that. But like you said, creating anticipating, how do I want to handle this? Again, what are the conversations I can have beforehand? What are the statements I can come up with if I know that, my boundary is not going to be welcomed? How can I affirm? I mentioned it earlier, but there's a technique that I use with a lot of my clients who are in relationships with kind of manipulative or emotionally abusive and narcissistic folks. And we call it the broken record technique, where when a request is made, somebody has a statement and they stick to that statement and they do not waver from it. And it's a statement that validates that they hear what the person is saying and then communicates what their boundary or their answer is. And then when the person tries to challenge it, they say that statement again. And when the person tries to challenge it, they say that statement again, not as a way of silencing or stonewalling, but as a way of saying, like, I do understand this is important for you, but this is what my decision is. And I think sometimes prep work like that can be helpful. But like you said, start small. That titration concept applies here too.
Mm.
Maybe it's I go to the church service and I don't sing. Maybe it's I go to the church service and I have long hair so I can put my earbuds in and I put a podcast on. Maybe it's I know how to daydream really well and I don't pay attention. There's a myriad of different things.
Yes.
And so to give yourself permission to be creative in that.
Yes. Yes. And I always talk with my clients around like this concept of sharing the pain. I think often as at least in my experience, many of us who have this kind of have been harmed or who are hurt, we try to rescue everyone else around us from feeling the pain that we are in. So this can be disappointment, this can be anger. Like we find when especially people close to us are feeling disappointed or angry in us, like that we need to avoid that at all costs. But my question is like, we are still in pain, and can we share that pain and help other people feel the weight of what we're going through? That is not a bad thing. To have our parents be disappointed in us because we won't go to church with them, they're sharing in our pain. It's not the same pain, but we're sharing some of the burden of that, and saying like they actually get to carry this too. I'm not going to rescue them from that, but instead let them feel some of the weightiness that I have been feeling for so long. And I think like that's a way that we can maybe start to work with some of those truly, really uncomfortable feelings, as feeling like I'm actually letting them align with reality here instead of trying to rescue them from reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, that's really, really good. That's awesome. Well, I know we joked about this at the very beginning when I was introducing you, but hear we hear that saying Jesus is the reason for the season, but what is the reason for the season if it's not Jesus? Which I think is a really fair question to ask.
It is,
I
yes.
know that I get this in different forms, like when I do like AMAs on Instagram, well, they'll say, if my life isn't about living for God, then what is the purpose of it, right? We're sold this idea that here is your ultimate purpose. And so then when we bring it back to a season like this and we say, here's the reason that we even celebrate, and now we've taken that reason away potentially or partially or shifted it around, then why do we celebrate?
Mhm.
Yeah, I have an idea of what that is for me, but I'll put it on you first, unless you want to divert and send it back my way.
I can go. Otherwise, we'll be diverting all
Okay.
day.
Yeah. No, you go. No, you go.
Sometimes we get two therapists together. Like, no, you.
Yeah. I love it.
I always notice that discomfort typically arises when I say this for folks, because we're so not used to this idea of being able to choose, or that there's something primarily or fundamentally wrong with, well, what if you get to decide? What if you get to choose what your reason is for the season? What are your values? Are there values? Are there things about the season that can align with those values? I think people often think, well, what if I'm wrong? What if my values are wrong? Or what if that isn't actually the reason? And like, says who? Who are the people who are saying that? And I think working with some of those questions and our own discomfort with choice, kind of plays into this answer as well. But are there things that are part of this season? Maybe it's a spirit of generosity and giving. Maybe that's something we can come alongside with. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's getting together with our family or chosen family, and being able to celebrate those connections. Like, those can all be reasons or things that we can choose to lean into, that may not that may align better with our new values than what we were originally taught.
Yeah. Big ditto to all of that. I mean, I love the idea of choice, which can sometimes feel so scary because, we were taught that there was specific certain answers for everything. And so to have choice can feel both liberating and terrifying all at the same time. And so, yeah, I would say you get to choose and it gets to change every year if you want it to. I know there's been years for me where the reason for this season has been to slow down, to wrap things up. And other times it's been for joy and connection. And so I think more in so many areas of my life, that's what I love the most is that there is this evolution that can happen from year to year, depending on where we're at and what we need. If you're like, well, where do I even start? I think for me, one of the things I did is I went back and reflected, like, what were the things I really enjoyed? What were the things that actually like brought a smile to my face? And could I either replicate those exactly? Or if that's not possible, can I take kind of the spirit or the meaning of that? And so it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go to a church service with my entire family anymore, but I do value togetherness and I value connection and I value relationships. So what could that look like? Maybe that's with family or with chosen family or with friends. What does that look like in a time like this? And can I initiate that? And then can I participate in that? I love the way Christmas music makes me feel. I don't know how to, I don't have a lot of words to describe it, but it feels really important for me to take time to sit with my Christmas lights on, no other lights in the house, and just listen to Christmas music and just smile. I mean, I literally just sit there and smile. And I'm like, but how often do I get to do that in other ways? Like that to me feels really cool. And I probably look like a little kid. And maybe that's the exact point. I think there's something really beautiful about that. And so, yeah, you get to decide the reason for the season. And if next year it's totally different and you want to be a Scrooge, that's okay. Go for it. Be the best Scrooge ever,
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing I would say or ask is can we make room for the grief in that too? Like for the loss that comes, even if we don't believe any of it anymore, often there's still loss involved. We're losing something. I have spent many Christmases alone. I've lost count at this point, where it's just myself and my dog. And some of that has been by choice, some of that hasn't been. But it's to the point of now where I have built my own traditions of, when I spend Christmas alone, I do this. I make cinnamon rolls in the morning. I put on pajamas. I watch TV or movies or whatever. But there's also a massive amount of grief in that. And
there is.
To be able to hold together, here are the things that I love about this season, but here are the things that are still really hard. And the day can be melancholy sometimes, with warmth and goodness, but also sadness. And I think all of those things are intermingled in all of these questions of both what do we hold on to, but also how do we grieve the loss?
Absolutely. I love it. And, I know we don't have these questions on here, but I am thinking of some other ones, but there's simple ones that I'm curious to know. And maybe we get quick lightning round or something. I'm curious to know, do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
I don't have a favorite. I have I have ones that I return to. I love Elf. For some reason, I hated that when I first saw it, but I love it now. All of the gay movies that have been coming out recently have shot to the top of the list.
They're so good.
Oh my gosh, yes. What's the one with Fran Drescher? There's one with Fran Drescher that I've watched over and over and over again that I've loved from I think it was Hallmark. I don't know what it was, but Lifetime, I think.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to need to know the title for that when you think of it.
I'll find it. Yes.
Yes, I'll say, okay, my favorite all-time Christmas movie is Home Alone 2.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
There is
yes.
a scene in it where Marv electrocutes himself. And
Yes.
to this day, I become a child who's like 10 watching it for the first time. And I am like rolling on the floor laughing. And inevitably, every year, one of my siblings or I send that, like, take a screen grab, send it to the other people or other siblings and just laugh because it was just such a delightful part of our childhood.
Oh, yes.
But with Elf, I think it's a hilarious movie. And there was a particular one of my siblings, we were at a youth conference. Actually, it was like a youth leaders conference, and we were bored because we were just like, we are done listening to this stuff, and started playing around. And this is before smartphones. So I had my digital camera. And we decided to recreate the escalator scene, where he stretches his legs out.
Yes.
And we did it once as a practice run. And my brother was Elf and I was filming it. Did it the second time, and he stretched way too far out.
No. Oh, no.
It is to this day like one of my absolute favorite memories. So I'm gonna have to find it. Yeah. Okay, what is a favorite? I mean, I know you mentioned a little bit. What's a kind of a favorite Christmas tradition or holiday tradition of yours that may or may not have to do specifically with the holidays, but is done around this time of year?
Yeah, mine is, I mentioned cinnamon rolls. Mine is cinnamon rolls. Like I have different variations of it depending on my capacity for the season, but my mom growing up would do a cinnamon roll party the Saturday before Christmas where we invited everyone we knew to drop by between 10 and 3 and have a cinnamon roll before shopping or whatever they were doing that day. So it was in the morning, didn't conflict with anyone else's holiday parties. I've done that some years where I just invite everyone I know and make literally hundreds of cinnamon rolls. People just stop by and it's so fun. There are other years where I'm like, I can't make hundreds of cinnamon rolls and I just make a batch for myself and call it good. But yeah,
I love it.
It's cinnamon rolls.
That is so great. Oh my gosh. I love cinnamon rolls, but I'm also like cannot do gluten or dairy.
Yes. Right.
But I just found the best gluten-free cinnamon rolls ever. They are so, so good. I can't remember what they're called. Daddy something, of course. So I will be making those and I will think of you maybe I'll FaceTime you as I eat them.
Yes, please.
Yes. But maybe that needs to be my tradition. I love that. That's so fun. I already said kind of what my tradition is. I love turning all the lights off and just listening to Christmas music. Oh, it is the best. I'm trying to think. Any other like fun little Christmas? What age were you when you knew Santa wasn't real? Or did you even have Santa?
From the beginning, my parents thought I was lying to believe in Santa. And they were adamantly against it. So from the very beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
you were holier than I was.
My parents were, at least.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say it would have been second or third grade. Like, however, I don't know. Is that like maybe 7? I was 8 or so. And I figured it out because, my parents would have special wrapping paper for the Santa gifts. And I happened to see it. And then there it was from Santa. And I pulled my parents aside, like after all the gifts. And we went up to their room and I said, I think you guys are Santa. And they were like, how, why do you think that? And I said, well, I saw this wrapping paper in your closet. And then you said it was and then it says from Santa. And I was like, but I think you did it. And they couldn't even, I was so serious that they couldn't even try to push it any further. And then the next year I was my brothers were like, it's Santa. And I would look at my parents and kind of laugh because, we were in on this secret together. And it's so sweet. Yeah.
Mm.
So, anyways, well, is there anything else that you want to say about religious trauma and the holidays? Anything else that you wish we would have hit on or questions that had been asked before we wrap things up for today?
I think we hit on a lot, but I do come back to those categories of like care, compassion, bringing those to ourselves and to others if we have capacity. Yeah, I think that that's so key for getting through difficult seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. All God's people said amen to that one. Well, Matthias, I'm so happy that you are here today. Can you just share with us where people can find you? Are you taking on clients? What do we need to know about you?
Yeah, thank you. This has been so fun. Yeah, you can find me across the internet at Matthias Roberts, matthiasroberts.com. I think I have some openings. I'm not positive, but if you are interested in that and are in Washington State, because I can only see folks who are physically located in Washington State. If you live in Washington State and are interested, please do feel free to reach out. My therapy practice is called Liven, Liven therapy.com. You can find all the information there. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I will have all of that linked in the show notes. And again, just thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everybody, I'm sure everybody will just love this. And you just gave us so much wisdom. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is a wrap for this episode of Sunday School Dropouts. It was so wonderful to have Matthias here. I just appreciate his perspective, his just his gentle spirit and his therapeutic knowledge. I think he is so wonderful. His work is so great too. If you haven't had a chance to look up his books, please do. Like I said at the beginning, his book Beyond Shame was one of the first out there about, sexuality and shame coming out of religion. And then, of course, his newest one, which came out in October of this year, I got to read ahead of time and give my own endorsement. It's called Holy Runaways. And I remember after reading a couple chapters, I texted a friend of mine and I said, oh my gosh, this book is just incredible. So make sure that you check him out on Instagram and his website and all the different platforms, order his books. We will be back next time with the second part of the holiday Q&A with my friend, Cindy Wong Brandt, who is the creator of Parenting Forward. It's a group of parents learning how to parent after religious trauma. So catch us on the next episode for that. And until then, be blessed.